You won't believe who I found here at the Wisconsin Broadcast Association. 3 amazing engineers and me. Okay, I got the microphone though. And we're talking here with Mark Persons. Mark, I see you at all these places, and so delighted to see you here. Thanks for coming.
Well, it's good to see you here too.
And what do we got here?
I have my latest tie.
Yeah.
And in here, there's something they call a tube. But it's the latest technology.
I've heard of these tubes.
Yeah, I mean, we should throw away our transistors and go with this hollow state technology.
Hollow.
That's
state.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, they put these elements inside of a glass envelope.
Yeah.
And then they evacuate it, so there's no air.
No
in there.
way.
Yeah.
You mean there's no air?
Yeah, they do that.
They make nice heaters.
They do that. And then the magic happens on the inside. It's absolutely terrific.
I've heard that these were also called valves.
Oh, our good British friends across the pond called them
That's
valves.
right. That's right. Yeah.
That's a good description for them.
Good, yes.
Yeah. So I actually understand how a triode can be a valve, and I guess a tetrode is a better valve.
Yeah,
it takes less turning to get the water to flow or not flow.
Well, it's a higher gain valve.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Without breaking into oscillation.
Okay. What about a pentode? What's the benefit there?
It's devilishly good.
Higher gain, yes.
Do we have a septode or an octode?
There's an octal socket.
An octal socket.
Yeah.
Is there just a big valve or big tube?
So I worked on a transmitter that had it was a Harris MW50B, and it had tubes that were about this big.
No way.
Yeah,
And how tall?
about like that.
Okay.
And there's 4 of them. It was a pulse width modulated AM transmitter. So
Which one was that? The Harris? Which one?
Harris MW50B.
Oh, okay.
And I worked on MW5s and then MW10s, which were twice as bad as a 5. and now the 50 must have been 5 times badder than the 10.
Yes, in some ways it was. And so the air handling in this transmitter building was a lot of air, but not much filtering. And so I very often cleaned it, and it was quite a task. And so it was important in a transmitter that had probably, 50,000 volts maybe, 40 or 50,000 volts. You know, in that diode stack for the...
It's at least 30,000, I remember that.
Yeah.
In the modulator part,
That's right, yeah.
Right.
And so anyway, it was so dirty, it was always denatured alcohol and rubber gloves and lots of washing, and because otherwise it would be arcing over. And
that's right, yeah.
one of those diodes went,
goodness.
it was like a zipper, baby. A big stack.
And how big was the transformer for that thing? Was there a pretty big transformer for that?
So I think there wasn't a high-level plate modulation transformer due to the PWM scheme.
Right.
But the transformer out on the pad from the electric company, I don't think you could put it in the back of a half-ton truck. It was pretty big.
So we're here talking at the Wisconsin Broadcast Association. I introduced Mark Persons. He's been a fixture at this and other shows for a long time. We're going to have you back on TWRT.
I look forward to that. And you know what was really shocking to me?
What's that?
Is that I used to come to these things as a young guy when I had brown hair, that kind of thing. But here was the funny part. They wanted to know who was the longest, who had been in broadcasting the longest. Turns out I was today.
You were the last man standing.
Last man standing. I was just shocked. I thought, well, somebody here has got to be older, than me. But
I thought it was going to be Gary Mock.
Okay, well, he looks the part.
So we're also here.
Gary, we love you.
We're also here with John Antonuk. He's from this area, but you're in Fairbanks, Alaska now.
That's right.
Where was the MW50 you were talking about?
It was in Fairbanks.
Oh, okay. And my new friend Steve Smith is here. Steve Smith with Salem in the Minneapolis area.
Yep. Twin Cities. And I started actually my career in Nome, Alaska, over at KICY.
Excellent.
So
we were talking about AMs, and I know you have built and fixed a lot of AMs.
Yeah.
You've got how many AMs do you have?
Just one right now.
One now.
Yeah.
But you, crazy man, had 4?
I have 4. I'm the young guy with 4 AMs. I'm not quite sure how it worked out, but it did. So it's been fun. In Egan or in the Twin Cities.
Okay.
So, and they're all under 5,000 watts or less. So that's fun. All but one. 3 of them are directionals. So it's a lot of fun. But I got my start on a DX50, and then I went to work for Salem in Seattle, and we had an RCA with tubes. So I jokingly told my boss, I'm like, it was a gray cabinet that was about 4,000 watts. Had the big glass squares, probably. But I had to give my boss a hard time because I'm like, what are those things? Because my first transmitter was a DX10, and then it was a DX50. And he's like, well, those are. I'm like, no, I'm joking. I know they're tubes, but I never had to work on tubes. So you guys are talking about tubes and going like, oh yeah, those tube things.
So don't you love Nautel's campaign to save the tubes?
and Nautel advertises that they've never built a transmitter with tubes, but that's only partially true. The truth is that some of their very first transmitters had incandescent light bulbs to indicate things on the front.
Oh, that's a tube, isn't it?
So that's a tube. That's right.
Because it's got a filament and it's evacuated.
That's right. That's right. So by definition.
Not even a diode. That's a pretty rudimentary tube.
So in the environment of Fairbanks, Alaska, or Nome, Alaska, what is different? My stations are in Mississippi, right? I mean, Mississippi is a bowl of moisture and bugs, and snakes, and cotton bolls, and dust. And how is taking care of a transmitter in Nome or Fairbanks different than in a bowl of moisture and bugs?
Well, in Nome, it was the fact that the buildings move. So all the buildings sit on pylons because of the permafrost. So every couple of years you have to re-level your building, and so all the doors are cut really wide so they close because one year they might close and the next year they might not close. So you have to get your building re-leveled and check all that, and there's permafrost. What other fun things?
I'm guessing that you don't use rigid line between the transmitter and the tower. No. A little flexible coax there.
Flex is good. Flex is good. You don't need much for air conditioning. It's pretty much just a really big blower motor to get some cool air in there.
It's a dry cool.
It is. Well, actually, in Nome, it's quite moist.
In Fairbanks, it's a dry cool.
So tell me about.
So what about towers and anchors in Alaska?
Too.
Yeah.
Do they move together or?
Oh no.
No. We ended up. They ended up having to take out the one anchor, and I think actually all three. After I left, they drove caissons down to the bedrock. That's what we did, and they ended up doing there to fix that problem.
That far, really? So
yeah, it was like 30.
Fairbanks, they put 40-foot-long steel I-beams in the permafrost.
What? 40 feet down?
Yeah.
To get to bedrock?
No, it's not to bedrock. It's just to make enough friction because the tension of the guy wires to pull up was moving the original anchors. If you think about a traditional anchor and regular soil that's not permafrost, and you put that screw in there and it just holds. Well, permafrost in the summertime, and now we're seeing global warming in Alaska. It turns to jello, particularly when you do construction. You scrape the organics off, there goes the insulation, and then it melts. And so the guy wires pull, the anchors pull, so you can't tension the tower. The base is shifting, the building is shifting.
Yep.
My company just spent, I think, over $100,000 a couple of years ago to drive 3 steel I-beams in the anchors, 2 on either side of the tower base with another one across, pick the tower up, put it back down. And we haven't fixed the building yet. It's going like this, and where we used to have the threshold of the front door was 2 feet above grade, 20 years. So I just had a set of steps built on the front of the building because I was having to climb a ladder up into the building for what was previously on grade in 20 years.
Wow, this is,
And the ground subsided.
we've got I engineered for a station in a Mississippi River floodplain, and there was a boat tied up at the telephone pole at the road, and sometimes you'd have to use the boat to get to the transmitter site. But that sounds like nothing compared to what you guys do. That's crazy.
So we're hoping to get the building stabilized, and so the tower is now in good shape because the tower crew wouldn't climb it, and I don't blame them. No. Because you site it with a transit, and of course it's
You've got to have a lot of leaning weird towers there.
key thing, and so it's just something that has to be dealt with. Some places have it, some places don't, so amazingly, It was cheap land when the broadcasters bought it. Sure, right? Yeah.
And it was yeah. So, Mark, you want to close us out? You got anything interesting to talk about that you found either interesting here today, or what you're doing that's particularly
You come to a conference like this, and then you get to see people that you know and get reacquainted. Very, very important. And I don't know, Nautel's got new transmitters. Everyone's got new things. So, I wouldn't miss it, even though I'm practically retired, but not quite.
Will you ever retire?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I was born into broadcasting. We should talk about that someday. That's a serious thing. It really is.
Your father was a broadcaster and built stations, and you did it. You cut your teeth on it.
That's right. My father started in the 1920s as an engineer.
Oh my goodness.
That was back when you did everything. You announced on the air, only because it was, well, and of course you had to repair your transmitters frequently too. So, as you can well imagine. But that developed into a complete radio network back in the 50s. It was huge. We should talk about that at length someday.
We will. In fact, we're going to have each of these three gentlemen, Mark, John, and Steve, as guests on This Week in Radio Tech on episodes coming up. So you stay tuned for This Week in Radio Tech. Check us out at thisweekinradiotech.com. And we do a new show every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And we've been here talking about all kinds of technology, a lot of fun stuff. I'm Kirk Harnack at the Wisconsin Broadcasters Clinic.